Resources and trade. All right, so this is picking up where we left off with the last ones, or this past few series of notes dealing with economics, systems of economic systems, and now we're discussing resources of trade. And what you want to think about is the reason why people have to trade, or one of the primary reasons that people have to trade, is one, natural resources. Most natural resources are not distributed evenly throughout the earth. And what that means is that some parts of the earth are more wealthy with natural resources than others, both human resources and things that come from nature. And that because of this, because you'll have some areas that are wealthy in, for example, spices, or areas that produce a lot of gold, or areas that produce a lot of oil, much more of these resources than their people can use. They trade with countries who are not as blessed as they are, who are not as fortunate. And they trade and they barter. And barter is just the term of trading one thing for another. Or they will purchase things using currency. And currency is just the way that we exchange. It's a medium used to facilitate the exchange of goods. What this graphic illustrates, though, what this map illustrates, is the distribution of minerals throughout the world. And what you'll see, just to highlight the point that the natural resources are not evenly distributed through the world, tons of resources in Asia. Tons of mineral and natural resources in Asia. A lot of them in South Africa. A lot of mineral resources in the Canadian-United States border. A lot here. A lot. But you see there's not as many in Africa or in Europe or in Iceland. A ton of mineral resources in Australia. But what we learned earlier is that the majority of the world's population goes through here, right? These places here do not have as many resources as other places. That just illustrates it. Now, if I were to show you a different map illustrating the amount of oil, you would see something similar with a ton of oil here, here, and here, and even in Africa, but not so much with the rest of the world. And so that's how it is. Certain parts of the world just have they have access to more resources. Dealing with global trade. So we'll talk about a couple things with global trade. Two concepts I want to make sure that you guys understand. One is export, and when you export something, that's just to send or transport products to another country. When you import, that is to bring in products from another country. And what this graphic illustrates is it's a cartogram of the exports of trade and wood primary products. And I'll show you another one. But what you see is this is a great illustration for trade. You see arrows going all around, arrows going to Europe, arrows coming from Europe. That is how trade works. You send products to a country, and a country will send you products back. And this, for them, that they can use in this particular example, wood is being traded. With this graphic, you see the trade of dairy, where dairy products, how dairy products are being traded. So you see a lot of trade is coming to the United States, right, from the European Union. And this was in 2003. But this shows a lot of cheese, milk, butter, powdered milk. We do a lot of trading with Europe with cheese, buttered milk. And not just us, but the rest of the world. And this shows the free flowing of trade of milk products. So when we start discussing trade, everything is just people cannot just trade from one country to country. It's hard for countries to countries. They just cannot just trade as much as they would like. There's certain barriers to trade. So we'll discuss some of those barriers now. One of the main barriers of trade are the governments. Governments have a vested interest in managing trade because to help them suit their benefit. Also to help them suit their benefit economically as well as politically. Dealing with a couple concepts we'll go over. The concept of what exactly is a tariff. A tariff is just a tax that is added to the price of goods that are brought into a country. Oftentimes, country uses tariffs to make incoming goods that are brought in from other countries, more expensive or expensive to the point that where people would not buy them. For example, the United States, or not the United States, China. When we trade with China and Japan, they place tariffs on our goods. And the reason that they do that is that they will end up making American goods, even though some of the things that we trade with them are superior products, they're so expensive that the average Japanese or Chinese citizen will not purchase them because they're that much more expensive. They do that to protect the Asian businesses. Now, a quota. A quota is a number or a limit on a product or a quantity of a good that can be imported for a particular country. For example, we may say that Japan can only send us 1 million cars a year. They can only trade with us 1 million cars a year to protect U.S. auto workers, because the Japanese are able to make quality cars at a lower price than we do. So to protect U.S. car makers, we may say, look, you guys can only send us 1 million cars a year. That is it. After 1 million cars, you cannot send any more cars into the United States. So in doing that, we will prevent Japanese companies from overflooding the U.S. market and putting U.S. auto companies out of business. Now, like an embargo, I apologize. An embargo means that you ban trade with another country altogether, as a way to punish that country for political or economic differences. This is something that we'll study a lot. You'll study a lot next year when we get to world history. You'll discuss different embargoes. They go with, and these are done for political reasons, not economic reasons most of the time. 90% of the time, embargoes are for political reasons. So currently right now we have different embargoes on Cuba. One of the most famous, we've had an embargo on Cuba, which we do not allow other countries to trade with Cuba. We've had this embargo going for like 40 years. If you know anyone who's been to Cuba, or if you ever go to Cuba, Cuba is literally stuck in the 1960s because of our embargo with them. The cars, everything is from the 1960s because of our embargo. We will not allow other countries to work with them. Talking about the concept of free trade. What exactly is free trade? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's kind of a Captain Obvious. What free trade means is that when countries remove all the barriers of trade, tariffs, quotas, when tariffs and quotas are removed to make trade as equal and as even, it's to make trade flow freely between countries, not necessarily evenly, but definitely freely. So free trade is just the removal of all tariffs from countries, all tariffs, all quotas, when countries are working together in trade to allow goods to be, as many goods as possible to be traded. So some examples of different agreements that have been put in place to promote free trade, to promote more cooperation, to promote countries trading with one another and removal of tariffs are the General Trade Agreement, the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs, or the GATT. This developed into the World Trade Organization in 1995, and what they are pretty much the trade policemen for the world. Countries report one another to the World Trade, to the WTO for unfair trading practices. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. What this NAFTA has done, it lifts all the trade barriers, or most of the trade barriers, between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. So these countries are able to just trade freely. And the European Union. The European Union is an economic association of most of the countries in Western Europe, definitely. And they have a common currency, which means they all use the same dollar bill or the same mode of currency. They do not use the dollar. They use something called the euro. And they also have removed many of the trade barriers. So those countries are able to trade with one another without tariffs or quotas. And they all use the same form of currency in Western Europe. The end. Make sure you highlight what needs to be highlighted. Have a great day.